Hi everybody, Uncle Max here from Life to the Max show. I mentioned in a previous video, an interview with LDS Prepper, that while we were at this particular camp practicing our longer term camping skills and setting up our glamping camping situations and practicing how to use things like water and our cooking implements and showers and maybe solar if you want to set it up, all those kinds of fun things you're going to see in a lot of our future camping or happy camper segments. There's just some very impressive camps set up for this, so stay tuned for that. But we mentioned that there was a ham radio class that we had taken, and he and I happened to be in this same class on ham radio and communications in general. And I always like going because I always learn something new from each one. It helps me to, if it's been a while since I've been playing around with my ham radio, or it helps me to clean off any rust or barnacles that might have been forming on my knowledge, and to brush it up and to be a little bit more, up to speed on it. So it was a great class. I want to thank this guy named Ron who shared this class with us from people mostly around the Intermountain West states that came. Anyhow, I want you to check it out. There's some really good information there. They cover all kinds of things. This will be kind of a broad brush what was taught in this class. We're going to be breaking down a lot of the things that he talked in this class, and we'll go a little bit more in depth in them, but we'll break them down in little chunks so we can have over time, so that you have a chance to really absorb some of those details that maybe he went across a little bit fast. Like, what does amplitude, what does AM versus FM mean? What's the difference? And what is wideband FM? What is amplitude modulation versus frequency modulation? What are some of the features that some of these radios have, like PTT, Vox, Scan, what the different bands are? We're going to cover all that. We're going to chunk it down little easy segments, and before you know it, you're going to know a lot of this stuff. Just like when you learned your addition and then you worked on your multiplication, things like that. Before you know it, you're going to know a lot of this stuff, and you're going to have some awesome communications knowledge that will help you to be in so much a better situation in an emergency, or even not in an emergency, than the average person, like the phonetic alphabet per se. I've used that in a phone call. I think I mentioned that near the end of this, in which sometimes over a communication line, whether it's over the air or over a wire, sometimes you just can't hear people on the other end very well, and it's kind of a little bit garbled, or you miss out the fact that there are 9 letters that all have the same sound, like B, C, D, E, G, P, T, V, Z, something like that. And a lot of times those letters get mixed up, so we're going to teach you the phonetic alphabet, how to understand, recognize those different things. So there's a lot of good stuff coming your way. So stay tuned. Check out this. Hopefully you'll really like it. It kind of gives you a good overall picture. If you are currently a ham, jump on, listen, see if you know everything they're talking about, or if you can learn something new. Give us some suggestions on some of the things that we can break down and give them a little bit more detail and baby step into, and help our newbies get to know it a little bit better. And if you're an Elmer is a ham radio person that really has been around a long time, really knows her stuff, maybe knows electronics and radio propagation, things like that a little bit better. Find one in your area, and find a local ham club in your area, and you can just go to a local meeting and say, hey, I'm interested in learning more. They can tell you where the local classes are, or if you want to learn more in depth, you can find out where your local nets are. A net is something that ham radios, somebody's net control, and then people check in with that radio frequency net, and there's just a lot of really wonderful things to check in and to learn about. So hopefully you check that out, and hopefully you'll have some fun with it, and we'll see you at the end.
That's what I recommend people get the technician license, and then start listening to it. Get somebody to help you learn how to program it, and just start listening to it. And you'll listen to how hams talk on it. And when they first start talking on it, what do they say? You're not going to understand it. Don't worry about it. You're not going to be understandable talking about something you're good at until somebody gets a little bit more experience under your belt. After a while, you will learn what they're talking about, and then you'll be able to understand.
The 20, 40 meter band is gone. I mean,
we're going to talk about it all that. But to get started, you want to get a 2 meter radio.
Real quick on the UV5R, another couple nice features is it has a built-in flashlight, so you can look through your bag and stuff like that. And they also have a built-in FM radio. Yeah. And so you could be listening to announcements like this, but you could leave it such that if somebody is to call in.
This is a UV5R.
Yeah. So he was listening to announcements, but he had one of his kids playing on the hill, and they called in and said, hey.
The healthy healing power. This is the Camp FM radio. It's running right now. And it can listen. Now, if you're using this, you're listening to the FM radio station, and a call comes in on one of the two frequencies that you've got up on it, it will interrupt your FM and go to that and listen in, so you can and stay there for a little bit and talk for a little bit, and then you can go back. It'll go automatically go back to the FM radio. So, if you like to walk, stick one in your hind pocket and an earphone in your ear. Turn it to FM radio you like and walk around. When a call comes in, it will interrupt you, and your wife says, "You need to get home right now," so you can run home instead of walk home. Anyway, that's most emergency groups in wherever you're at are going to use the frequencies that UV5Rs can program in. And they can program in a lot more frequencies than you're allowed to use. So be real careful of it. They will also program police frequencies and fire frequencies. You can put them in. You don't want to be able to talk on those, or you don't want to make sure you don't, because you can talk right back to the police. That's not a good thing. So anyway, be real careful of them. Use the frequencies that we're allowed to use. And you can generally go on VHF Society, and there will be a list of frequencies and repeaters and all the stuff that you're going to want to know about the local frequencies. Now, we use them, and there's going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 nets pretty much every night during the week. And what a net is a group of people that get together on the radio once a week or once a month or once a whatever, and just call in and keep in touch. That's all they're doing, is keeping in touch. They may have a little bit of news, a little bit of help, this is what we're doing with our club or something like that. And a net is good because it gives you a chance to push the button and talk on the radio. Nobody minds if you get on their net and say, "I'm a visitor, just learning how to do this. Is it okay if I call in?" Nobody will mind. I've never heard a problem with that. Now, people as young as 8 and 9-year-old kids have got to have radio license, technician license, or old people, they've still got their technician license. So get your technician license and get a UV5R or a similar one. They're going to be the cheapest, and learn how it operates. We're going to go over a little bit of that, but not much today.
And you don't have to know Morse code.
And you don't have to know Morse code.
I want to learn Morse code, but you don't have to anymore.
What this is a list of ham frequencies.
Sweet.
Your bands.
Ham band frequencies. Let's look at this one first, the second one I have here. This is a list of the radio spectrum. Now, what the radio spectrum is everybody knows sound waves have a frequency, and that is a low frequency. Well, the radio spectrum goes up in frequency. Above that, it goes up the radio spectrum, and then it goes into X-rays and gamma rays and all that. They're all tied together. Well, radio waves, this is a list of the frequencies. And if you go down through them, you can see the frequencies, and then what they're called. Like if you look at the top one, from 3 to 30 hertz, that's called extremely low frequency. That's the frequency that submarines communicate on. And the reason is they use a frequency like that is because it will travel through the earth. The frequency will travel through the earth, but it has to be real slow so that it can travel and get the information, and it'll maybe give one piece of information, the next give another. It's really slow, and it's not something that we can use. And if you go on up to 300 kilohertz to 3 megahertz, that's about in the middle. That's medium frequency, MF, and that's the frequency that AM radio is on. So if you listen to an AM radio station, that's on there. That's the frequency it's running on. The next one up, 30 megahertz, 3 megahertz to 30 megahertz is high frequency, and that's where your CB band is at. On up from that is VHF, 30 to 300 megahertz, and that's VHF frequency, and that's where the UHF ham bands are. The next one up is UHF, and that's the other one. So when we talk about this, being able to cover 2 bands, it's the UHF and the VHF. They will program the frequencies, some of the frequencies in with that. Okay, then if you go down a little bit, it says radio theory, it shows AM and FM. AM is a amplitude modulated, FM is frequency modulated. AM radio, amplitude modulation. Or, FM radio, frequency modulation. These radios that we use for ham, and this is the bands that most hams will be talking on, are FM. And if you remember when you're listening to an AM radio and there's a lightning storm somewhere, you hear them flashes and crashes from the lightning. With FM, you don't get that. It's a lot clearer. The AM will travel further, but FM is clearer when it gets here. So that's kind of the difference. Then I talk a little bit about the frequencies, about AM radios, FM radios, weather frequencies. Those, if you look at them, they're in the 162.4. If you go up above here and find the 162.4, you'll find out which frequency band they're in. You've all heard of the weather frequencies. There's a weather frequency being transmitted at all times, covers the whole United States. There's 7 of them, and one of those will generally get wherever you're at, so you can get the weather. These radios
that has a built-in, doesn't it?
These radios will program those frequencies in, so you can have one get the weather for you. Scanners, they use a lot larger band plan than what we do talking on the radio, but they will also cover the frequencies that we use for local ham talking on with these kind of radio, which is a UHF and VHF. Now the scanners will pick up a lot more. That's where you're going to listen to the police. These will program the police bands in, so be careful that you don't program in simplex and it talks. When you push the button, you can talk to the police. Not a good thing. They will track you down. Okay, next section is shortwave radios. If you look, it doesn't really say. Shortwave radios are, you remember hearing about shortwave radios back in the 40s and the 30s. And those frequencies are still used. They're still available. They're still used, and it takes a radio to do it. Now, the radio that I use to listen to the radio station up here at camp also covers shortwave frequencies, so I can tune those in. And we talked about getting Radio Moscow. That's a shortwave frequency. I can tune those in. They're not bands that we generally talk on for hams.
I was just going to say, this is a Yaesu brand, Japanese.
Yep.
They're probably 10 times as much as those cheap Chinese ones, but this one is a VX7R, and it actually has pre-programmed in like the 3 most common frequencies from many different countries already pre-programmed in it, so you can turn in and listen to the shortwave as well as VX7R. It's a Yaesu.
You'll find that it costs quite a bit more than $25.
Yeah.
And for us starting out hams, $25.
Yeah.
That's a good.
That's a
place.
great starter, and if you drop your extra battery in off the boat, you're not going to cry too much because the batteries are really expensive too.
Yeah. I don't really use shortwave, but I have a shortwave radio, and I have a program because if something happens locally, I want to know what Moscow is saying or London is saying. I don't want just a local propaganda.
Yep.
I want to know what the world is thinking.
And they also go just to the San Francisco and local information.
There's a lot of
Yeah.
But if we have an EMP over North America and we've protected our radios in a Faraday cage, we can pull ours out later on and listen to what the rest of the world is saying through shortwave and find out what's going on.
I've gone a little bit further down under there. It's going to say sideband. And there's SSB, which is single sideband. Then the USB is upper sideband. LSB is lower sideband, and CW is Morse code. It's carrier wave, and that's generally where Morse code is. Those are different methods of transmitting radio frequencies.
Does anybody use CW anymore?
A lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
You get on not these bands, but the regular ham bands. There's a lot of Morse code.
Okay,
And it's a good place to go to practice.
Nobody was on phone when I had my license.
Yeah. Further down to Citizens Band. If you have a Citizens Band radio, get it out, learn how to use it. They are good radios. They've been around for forever, and they're still working. They'll hook it up to your car, cigarette lighter, or clips on, and CB radios will be used. So don't get rid of a CB radio. If you find one at a yard sale for $5,
Pick it
buy
up.
it.
Pick it up.
And try and get the 40 channel, and they can also be had in sideband, and which is a little bit better frequency distance than a plain CB, but it doesn't matter. Plain CBs work, so I try and emphasize don't get rid of a CB radio. Pick them up and use them.
And the upper and lower sideband on CB, most of the CBs don't have that, so you might be able to privately communicate a little bit more discreetly on the sideband than a regular CB frequency. So no, you're not bringing everyone in.
Okay, on down to the next section is FRS, Family Radio Service. If you go to Walmart and you see a radio hanging on a hook there, that is an FRS radio, and they're good. The thing about FRS is it's limited to a half a watt. A half a watt is not very much. These are generally, this is an 8 watt, and the one you're going to buy for $25 is going to be a 5 watt, and they really don't run 5 watts, they'll run 4 watts. But they're good enough to get the job done. Well, half a watt is going to get you somewhere, depending on, what's between you. Half a watt would be easy enough to get over into that other side of the meadow, and probably further than that. So a lot of people use them. So if you've got them already, get them out and learn how to use them and practice with them and get your kids so that they know how to use them. Now, FRS is going to be they're channelized. In other words, you're going to have a particular channel. And then they've got what is called privacy codes. Don't ever use a privacy code. All the privacy code does is stop everything else but that come to you. Now, you can talk on it, and it's going to go out to everybody. And your buddy down the street who's got his set of privacy code, he'll be able to hear it, but so will everybody else. So it's the privacy the wrong way. It keeps you from hearing everybody else. And one thing about, they use these at on cruises and at Disneyland. They'll use these and they'll set the privacy code. Now I don't have to worry about everybody talking over. You don't. The thing is, they're still talking on the same frequency. You can't hear them, but they can hear you. But you're saying, well, I haven't heard anybody talking for a long time. So you pull it up and you start talking, trying to track down where your wife and kids are. Somebody else was already using that frequency, and you're talking right over the top of them, and you didn't even know it. So if you use FRS, don't use the privacy codes. Just turn them off. Just go, and then if you pick it up and you want to know where your wife and kids are, if nobody's talking, you'll know it. You can push the button and start talking. Otherwise, you'll talk over somebody else, and that messes everybody. And because there's so many people use the same channels, frequencies, they have to be shared. And the better we cooperate on doing something like that, the better it happens.
2 quick experiences. I was waiting to get my car onto a ferry to go across the Puget Sound, and I had my FRS radio on, and I had it on scan mode, and I picked up a conversation, and they were taking one vehicle on and leaving another vehicle and trying to figure out where to put the keys, and say, well, we're going to put the keys on the front left tire, and I thought, this is really dumb because somebody else can hear this. I said, so I chimed in and said, why don't you put it on the front right tire? End of conversation. But I think they realized, hold it, somebody else can be listening, and this isn't as private as we thought.
Was you on the same privacy channel?
So they weren't using privacy.
They were using privacy, okay.
When you say all the members of your family to make contact, then you're assuming they all have their own call signs and things like that.
With FRS, you don't need call signs.
You don't need it with
There's
those are
no
just
license
those
with
things
FRS.
kids play with.
Which is the reason you see all the kids running around with their own FRS radio.
Okay.
It can be a problem, but it can also, if there's an emergency, you get the kids off of them.
Yeah, parents would take them away.
Block captains, they've got their radio, and an assistant block captain, or we call them co-captains. They've each got a radio. And the reason you need more than one in a block is because the earthquake does not say I'm going to be an earthquake on next Tuesday, so I'll be ready. It just happens, and you're going to find that 80% of the people gone. They're someplace else. So if you're wanting to get a reply back, the more people you can get that are there is the better reply you're going to get back.
And what we experienced is after the hurricane, a bunch of people left.
Yeah.
So if you get all your block leaders leaving because there's no showers, no bathrooms, no air conditioning.
One thing is you go asking about who is the radio person. If you ask things like that, you're going to be it. Understand who we call. The next step is GMRS. Now this is what I recommend people use. GMRS is kind of a gray area. You're supposed to have a license when you use GMRS. Most people don't. And most of the radios that say they've got 32 channels have GMRS frequencies on them. And somewhere in that manual, it's going to say you're supposed to have a license. But how many people read that manual like that? They just learn how to use it and they start using it. And they don't get the license. And there are 90% of the radios out there in the GMRS frequencies are not licensed. Anybody that's 18 years old and a citizen can get a GMRS license. It's about $85. It's good for 5 years. You just get online, go to the FCC, search GMRS, and they will help you find where you do. You give them your name, address, and send them, give them a credit card number for the $85, and they will send you a license. That's all it takes.
The cool thing is that covers your entire family.
It does. Your entire family, and we're all brothers and sisters.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's my brother-in-law and my nieces and nephews.
Your entire family.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
your own entire family is already covered. So your in-laws, your outlaws, your brothers, your uncles, your
All
sisters,
illegally.
your kids, they're all covered under that one license.
license, okay.
So I did a study one time, how much would it cost to get a ham license for so many people? If you get up to, I think it's 14 people, no, it's less than that. Maybe it's 8 people. It's cheaper to get one GMRS license and license 38 people in your family than it is for all 38 of them to get a technician license sold for only $15. And all 38 of them are not going to get the license anyway. So GMRS is kind of the way to go. In fact, that's what we're going to be using today. And we're going to be using the GMRS frequency. Okay, that's kind of the quick and dirty of the frequency bands. Now we're going to go through the one that you've got that looks like this. This tells us which are the bands that hams can use and which frequencies in those bands. If you look on the first page, you see it goes from 3 hertz or 3 megahertz, whatever it is, clear up to into the gigahertz. Those are all radio frequencies. Well, the ham bands that are covered by this don't cover all of them. They're just little teeny tiny sections of all of those. So you pick a single frequency, and then that frequency is split into maybe 10 or 15 other frequencies. It don't show it on here, but your radio can do that. So when you tune in a ham frequency, it's going to tune in down to the point something something something, and that's splitting a single frequency. That's how they manage to get all the radio spectrum in the available spectrum that we've got. It's really tough. Remember, not too long ago, we had UHF television frequencies, channels, and they got rid of those and went to digital. Now we've got digital. Now digital works differently, but they took those UHF frequencies and reallocated them to another group of radio users. They wanted the band because each one of those television used a large, wide bandwidth section of frequencies. Now they can shrink that way down and cut that into thousands and give that to a lot of different people. And so that's one of the reasons they did that. Plus digital, it's a new technology. It's nice, to use for television especially. What it is one channel, one station has one frequency, and that can be split into 4 different ones. And they can use it all for one and send out absolutely fabulous TV, or they can split it into 4 different ones and send out 4 stations at the same time. But they're not as high a quality TV. So that's essentially what digital gained for you. And it only uses that one frequency that they're assigned. Go down through here. The UHF that we use is called 2 meters. If you look on here, you'll find 2 meters over here. And you'll see that underneath that, on each side of that, there's a 144.1. That's the bottom of the 2 meter band that hams can talk on. Well, and it goes up to 148.0. You look on the end of that. That's a little section, little teeny. It covers 4 megahertz, but it's sliced up by tenths, and each those tenths is assigned a frequency, and then those are divided up into other things that you want to be kind of careful of. You don't talk on, like a repeater will be on one frequency. There's certain things that talk on that frequency that you're allowed to talk on it. but you might be interfering with somebody if you do. So find out. And you get on the UHF Society, and it will give you the band plan that tells you who uses what frequency and which ones you can get on. There's a section called repeater frequencies. And the way a repeater works is you talk on one frequency and listen at the same time on another frequency, or it's not the same time, but you listen on one and talk on the other one. And the repeater takes care of, you talk, and if you look at it, when you're talking on the radio, on a repeater, if you look, you know what frequency that it's set on. If you talk on that, push the button and look at that, it's going to show a different frequency. That's offset to allow the repeater to work. And then the repeater then picks up the frequency you're talking on and retransmits it on the other frequency that is everybody's listening on. That's how a repeater works. The reason for a repeater is because the frequencies we're using is direct line of sight. Now it'll go over this hill somewhat, but it's mainly line of sight. Now, I can't talk to somebody on the backside of that mountain. If you put a repeater up there, I can talk to it, and then it can talk to somebody on the backside of the mountain. So that allows you to get a lot further distance. The 70 centimeter band, and we're also allowed to use the 1 1/4 meter band, but very few people do. It's a small band, and you're allowed to talk on that, but not many people do, so
Why
nobody
not?
does. And
Would it be, don't these 2-meter bands get jammed quite a bit, or?
no, what it is, these are are programmed to use two frequencies, UHF and VHF, so they use that, but the in between is different enough that they have to have another circuit in the radio to do it. So rather than put that in there, now you can get these kind of radios, cheap radios, with that band on them. And sometimes you get all 3 bands on them. It will cost a little more, but it's got the circuitry to pick up those 3 bands. There's so few people that use those that I don't recommend people getting a radio for it unless your group uses them. Now, if a lot of people are not going to be on it, there you go. And your group, get on and use that band, and it's, a little bit more privacy. That's just how it is. Now, the GMRS is in the 70 centimeter band, and that's one we're going to be using today. We're going to do a little bit of practice, and it's in the 70 centimeter band. The CB radios is in the 12 meter, maybe it's 11 meter. And if you look on here, it doesn't show 11 meter, because hams are not supposed to talk on that frequency without a CB radio. In other words, you're not supposed to program your radio to talk on those frequencies. Hams do it all the time. But, and it's going to be the same with this one. CB at 4 watts maximum, and you can really crank out the watts.
But CBers never use extra power anyway.
No. Most of them that we're going to have, that we're going to want to deal with, are just 4 watts. And they do the job. They get by just fine. So always get a CB, and there'll be so few people using them anymore that they're good band frequencies to use. All these others, I've got a ham radio, a big, cost me a lot, ham radio, and I talk on 40 meters. You look through here, you'll find there's 80, so this would be 40 meters, because I've got an antenna that's tuned pretty close to the 40 meters. Now you can tune the antennas to talk on these others, but they're not going to talk as good. In other words, each band needs an antenna that's tuned pretty close to what it needs. You get a tuner and it will go ahead and allow your radio to talk on it, but it's not a perfect match, so it's not going to talk as well as it would if you had the right antenna. And antenna makes all the difference in the world. Let's talk about antennas a little bit. These radios got a little this antenna like this, and it's just a section of the length of the frequency that, if you had an antenna for it, it'd be about this tall. Well, that's the best way, but it's really inaccurate or hard to deal with. So they shrink them down in increments, and there's certain increments that work better than others. So they found that an antenna like this will talk pretty good on this one, and the other one will talk pretty good on this one, because they happen to be I'm trying to think of the multiple. So because this one works good on one, it also works good on the other because they're in close relation multiples.
Yeah. But this is a whip antenna for dual band, but then this is an extra one that you can take that gives you that full length. So this one would work better than the little
But if
rubber
you're
duck.
Right on your,
Yeah.
Yes, you can buy them. You can buy them.
Do that.
And this one's they call these a rubber duck because they're short and small and they're easy to pack, but they don't have as great a transmission. So you can get this telescoping one like you saw in the old
And
radio.
that will give you better. Now, if you're using it for a dual band or tri-band, maybe that's not the perfect length for one of them. So you can shorten it down a little bit, put a mark on it. So that's all the length, and that talks better than the long one. So, they're adjustable.
well, what kind of range do you have with the bigger antenna? Does it improve your range?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the better the antenna.
It will improve your range, but what we're talking about is mostly emergency, and we don't need that range. We just need around the camp.
Yeah.
So
So I have a 4-watt radio, and I've got a 13-foot antenna, dual band antenna on my house.
Yeah.
It's 45 minutes to go to Rexburg. I pick up Rexburg. We talk back,
you know why that is? Because it's outside
and it's way up.
and it's up high.
Right.
And it's tuned better for the
It's
full length.
tuned for the frequency.
So this one I can reach a few miles,
Right.
but the other one I'm reaching.
It doesn't take
next
a lot of power. In other words, half a watt, 1 watt, 4 watts, 10 watts. It doesn't take a lot of power to go a long ways if it's line of sight. If there's nothing between you and it will go hundreds of miles. But if there's anything in between you, including moisture in the air, it will attenuate that frequency so you don't get the distance. So, and an antenna tuned to the frequency you're going to want to use helps that too. An antenna outside is going to help. I use radios a lot when we travel. 2 people, 3 people travel with vehicles. A radio in each car, and you can talk to each other. You get about 2 miles apart, and it breaks up a little bit. So if you put an outside antenna on top of your roof, you get a lot better coverage. It doesn't have to go through the glass. It doesn't have to go through the car to get to you talking on the radio.
Using a FRS too, huh?
FRS will do, no, FRS won't allow for a removable antenna.
Oh,
GMRS or the hams, right?
An FRS radio, the antenna is mounted directly on it and can't be changed without.
They don't want it to go very far. That's the
Yeah,
purpose.
That's the idea. And FRS is, you don't need a license for it.
You don't have an FRS, no. You don't have the big thing.
Now GMRS, let's go ahead and
Well, while he's looking at that, this is just a cheap little FRS, but some of them have what they call Vox, which is voice activated. So if you're walking along or you're driving and you don't want to have to keep keying up every time, as long as there's no radio and other sound, as soon as you start talking, that opens up the transmitter and transmits it to them so you can have hands-free.
these have that same thing. Yeah. They do. And you want to be kind of careful of that because if you sneeze, it opens up.
Yeah.
And your sneeze goes out, So if you stutter a little bit, it's going to go out. So you got to be kind of careful what you do. Now, let's talk about GMRS and FRS. Now, I'm going to pass these out. GMRS and FRS use pretty much the same frequency bands, the same frequencies. And if you look on there, you'll see that there's a frequency and then it's divided into 0.000.
No fingertips.
They're in there. And that divides that one frequency into smaller bands. Well, FRS and GMRS use the same ones in those. But FRS is limited to half a watt and GMRS is limited to 5 watts. But you're not supposed to talk on an FRS frequency with 5 watts unless you're talking on it as a GMRS. In other words, you're not allowed to talk to an FRS radio with a GMRS radio on the same frequency unless you do. How are they going to?
I think some of them actually, if you look at the power output level, if you're changing, you'll see that it has a lower power level on 1 through,
Some of them will drop.
and then you turn over, you can see the power pump up to for the GMRS only frequencies.
We're going to use GMRS. That's what we're using. The leaders are using here in camp is GMRS. And I've got some GMRS radios we're going to use. And they are set on one of these frequencies that is an input to a repeater. GMRS is allowed to have a repeater. Now, I know this because I've got a GMRS license. If I'm teaching people, what about? I need to know what I'm talking about. So I bought the GMRS license. And all my brothers and sisters are covered under that, as far as I'm concerned.
It's your family.
Marcy, do you copy, Marcy?
Do they live in a different country or state or in the same neighborhood?
That doesn't mean you can talk to them. It just gives them a
You can
license.
talk pretty much line of sight.
Oh, nice.
Just line of sight, and that's all of this is line of sight. Well, if you get up higher, you can see further. It works the same way. You get up higher, you can get line of sight as well.
Yeah, that's why repeaters are on the top of peaks, so they can.
I'm in, and there's certain repeaters
Oh, yeah,
around,
it shows
up on the mountain, all around.
Nice.
Probably
You
outdated
talk to
now.
them, and I can talk
See,
to
we
the has a net every Tuesday night, and I get on that net every time I remember it and report in on it. And I'm north, and the repeater for it is south on High Mountain down there. I can still hit it. It's 10 or 12 miles, and I can hit it just fine. Everybody in the valley can hit it just fine. Once a month, they practice in simplex, which means no repeater, because if the repeater goes down, the power goes off, and the repeater's running on AC power, it's not going to be there. So you need to practice a little bit on simplex. So we use the same frequencies, but you talk direct radio to radio. And you'll find if you listen on that, it don't go near as far, because the repeater being up high, everybody can see it. But when you're down in the trees and in the houses, you can't see them, and the signal gets attenuated.
It's time to check in on Monday nights or something. Now, they're Idaho, so you're talking about two different groups. And
Two different frequency bands. She's talking HF bands,
Right.
which
People talk on 40 meter, 80 meter, and 160 meter. So if you look on here, you'll see those are up in here. Those are not technician bands.
They're not.
Technician can't talk on those.
that'd be general.
On some of them they can. You have to learn that a technician is it's called T, and if you look to you hear this side of each one of these,
Yeah.
it tells
Oh,
T will
oh,
be
yeah.
on there.
T, yeah, got it.
Yeah.
These bands, there's no T's on here.
I didn't know
Except for right down in here, on this one, and if I remember right, that's carrier wave or CW. So essentially, you can't talk on these radios on that band. Part of the reason is, even if you could, these only put out 5 watts, and minimum you can use on something like that is 100 watts. I've got a radio that I had got on, and it just barely gets through with 100 watts and a good outside antenna. Now, if you put up a good antenna up high and you get a lot of power, you're allowed to go up to 1,500 watts. You put that much out, then it will transmit all the way into wherever. Oh, I've talked to Chris but it's so sketchy that I check in, and that's about it.
See, I'm Idaho though,
Yeah.
so I'm sorry.
But you need to have a general license for that and a lot more expensive radio for that.
And I have
She does.
Yeah.
cover it now.
Okay, let's talk about GMRS and FRS a little bit. The last sheet I handed out, the frequencies are overlap. And FRS, anybody can buy that. You don't need a license for it. And if you look in the column, or the one that says GMRS or FRS, it's got an X under those in line with those frequencies that you can talk on with FRS, or that are programmed into your radio. And you'll notice there's other frequencies that aren't allowed FRS. Well, they're allowed GMRS, and if you look under the GMRS column, you'll see that there's some frequencies that are FRS that you're not allowed to talk on with GMRS. Another thing, these radios, you can program all of those frequencies into it. You're not allowed to talk on it. You can listen. You're not allowed to talk on it if you don't have a GMRS license. Even if you have a GMRS license, you're not allowed to use this because this is not accepted by the FCC as a GMRS radio. Do people do that? All the time. It's just a no-brainer. People do it. So I have one guy, block captain, I give him a radio, give it to him, no cost. He's a block captain. He said, what frequency we are using? I said, we're using GMRS frequencies. There are little nuances of the law. If you want to be strictly legal, you got to pay attention to it. They're not hard, but we're talking emergency here. We're going to get ready to have an emergency.
That's the same guy that drives 45 miles an hour in his neighborhood.
Or 45 mile an hour on highway.
On highway.
Yeah. He's the guy everybody's passing when they go down the freeway.
Except they can't pass because he's in the fast lane.
Yeah.
And that's illegal too.
That's against the law too. So.
With GMRS, you're actually allowed to have a repeater, and it uses 2 of the frequencies on here. There's a set called these here. They're down at the very bottom. Those are GMRS frequencies, and if you look, they're called repeater input frequencies. And you're allowed up to 50 watts on those. If you look at that, see the 467.575? That's the second one down. If you look up here, you'll find another one's 462, or 575. Right there. That is an output frequency. They are separated by 5 megahertz. That's how repeaters work. Remember, you got one that listens on a frequency and one that talks on a frequency. The repeater listens on just the opposite and transmits at the same time on just the opposite. That's how repeaters work. And with GMRS, you're allowed that to have one, and I've got one. I put it up, and if all the radios, if they're GMRS radios, I programmed that repeater frequency in one of the channels. These radios we're going to be using are the same ones. Like this is an FRS, and we're going to be using the same frequency as this. It's not legal. If you got a problem with that, don't take one. GMRS radios, and they are programmed with a GMRS frequency, and if you'll listen, when they start talking to you, you won't be able to hear them because it's on a different frequency. But they're the exact same radio. I just programmed a different frequency.
No, it's different. This is 8-24.
These radios have 16 channels. There's 15 of them that you're allowed to use that are GMRS frequencies. So it's got all of those, plus I put that repeater frequency in as the other one. So it talks on simplex on all 15 GMRS frequencies, and in simplex or repeater on the one frequency. So that's why I like to use these little radios. That and the fact that you buy them in bulk, you buy them for $11 a piece.
Those?
Yeah. They're really inexpensive.
So you can hand them out to your family.
Now they can be programmed to ham frequencies. So if you're not a ham and you want to stay legal, don't program them. Just use them on GMRS.
But you can program them on a ham frequency so you can't talk. You can just listen.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to listen on any frequency you want. You can listen, just can't talk. If you don't have a license, you can still listen. You're just not supposed to talk. No. We don't use these all the time. We're not carrying on conversations. So we're preparing for an emergency, and when there's a life or death emergency, all the rules go out the window. It's better to prepare and not than it is to practice with it all the time. Practice and learn how to use it, and then don't use these. If you get a ham license, get on the ham bands and use those to talk to nets and your friends and whatever. These are the phonetic alphabet, and the reason for this is when I say a letter, D and B, they sound real close together. This allows anybody listening to distinguish between them. And if you get a ham license, you're going to be wanting this because you're going to get a license number or code. You learn to say that phonetically anytime you're on the net. That's a mouthful. But you know, it rolls right off after you say it often enough. It just rolls right off. It'll say it, and people will not be able to hear it. So generally I'll go. Say it like that, and now people can understand it. You'll get people on the radio that push the button and say that whole thing in 3 syllables. And you don't understand a word they said. And if you're net control, you didn't understand them. Most of the time, you just mark them out that they weren't there, because they need to know better than that. So learn the phonetic alphabet. It's really easy. You use it a little bit anyway.
Or they'll get on and they'll say, this is Dirty Socks 5 instead of saying Delta Foxtrot.
Right. And some people will substitute other words for letters in. Z is one that gets substituted a lot. If everybody knows what they're talking about, it works. But it's easier just to learn to say the letters, the words that are there, and then everybody knows what they're doing.
It's all about communication. If you're trying to be
It's all about communication.
cute, it doesn't
And
help.
that's all we're doing is learning a little bit about how to communicate.
Is it helpful typically before you give the information, say, this is? So
It
that
is.
actually preps them to listen
Because
to it?
it gives them a chance to turn on their thinking, what's coming next. So it's a good idea to say, this is, thanks, Michael.
And also because my tendency that I find is that people push the button as they're starting to talk.
Yeah.
So if you say this is, it gives your body a
Yeah.
time to actually push the button.
A lot
And
of
so
people
then when
will
you
start in before they push the button.
right.
And that causes you'll say the information after the button.
And sometimes it takes a split second for the electronics to get
Yeah.
wrapped up in the repeater to pick it up and then resend it, so it's always good to have that. I've literally used this phonetic alphabet even on a phone call.
You know who that is?
It's like first three.
You're going to hear his call sign. With that call sign, you can look him up and find out who he is. And a lot of people on the ham radio have that programmed into their computer running while you're talking, and they will bring up that call sign from the FCC when he says it. So they will know who's talking. So you want to be kind of careful on what call sign you use, because they're going to look you up. If you didn't use a valid call sign, it's going to let them know. So GMRS don't have call signs. I mean, actually they do, but nobody uses them. It's never been used. But if your name sounds a lot like somebody else's name, which Ron are you? You're giving them phonetically, now they can write it down and know who you are. So that helps. Okay? You got a call sign, that's
That's a
great.
great call sign.
Learn that call sign.
Yeah.
Learn it to where you don't have to look it up. Practice it in your sleep. You know?
Obviously, I haven't used mine in a long time.
I can feel this.
Just say it so many times that you remember it. When I first started saying it was agony. So you got to do it, and after a while, you finally get to the point where you say it so fast nobody can understand you. Then you start slowing down. Okay?
Hello campers, this is Romeo Echo X-Ray.
Rex. Okay. That was just the right case, because I like that it was up close and everybody could hear it. It was
And
good level.
enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. Next. Get it closer to your mouth.
Greetings.
Push the button on the other side.
This is for hooking up.
Greetings, this is Lima Yankee November Echo Tango Tango Echo.
Oh, already put together in your mind and, yeah. But a net control will generally be writing it down, so.
Could you try it again, like 2 inches from your mouth, because you were pretty far and it was hard to hear.
Drifted. At the end.
Slow down a little.
Yeah, we're trying to decipher your name.
Closer.
Lima Yankee November Echo Tango Tango Echo.
Yeah, that was clear.
So what is your name?
Lynette.
Oh, wow.
Basically that.
No, you don't have to do it again, but when you use it, talk a
way
little bit
fast.
slower. Now remember, when you're giving information to people, talk a little bit slower so that they can process it after they hear it when you're done talking.
Also in an emergency, adrenaline's flowing
Yeah.
and speed kills.
And people talk so fast, especially during an emergency, that it's hard to understand. Ask them to repeat it. You've got to get the information correct. If you don't, it can be life and death. So, get it correct.
And the phonetic alphabet isn't just for your call sign, it's for some word you didn't quite.
Yes.
Could you say, can you spell that phonetically? And then, I heard something completely different.
Okay, next.
This is November Alpha November Charlie Yankee.
Okay. Nancy.
This is Bravo Echo Charlie Kilo Yankee.
A little distortion on that. Is
Yeah,
that?
there's a little distortion. Try it again. A little closer to your mouth.
Echo Charlie Kilo Yankee.
What's causing that?
Get it a little closer to your mouth.
Between radio.
Oh, is
This
that
is Bravo Echo Charlie Kilo Yankee.
it? Is she just barely off?
Yeah, it could be the radio device. It's not you missed it.
It's her magnetic personality. It's different.
So if I want to communicate with my friends and other contacts, can I use this channel or what do you recommend?
Are you going
Only
person?
for emergencies, I know.
No,
but-
this channel is fine because it's not the channel that the camp leaders are using.
Okay.
So it'd be fine.
It'd be all right, even though we're practicing, it's not an emergency.
Turn
It's
your
okay.
radio on and listen to that frequency for a while. And if nobody's talking on it, it's all yours.
Then it's open and you can start.
Yeah.
And if you have one person you want to talk to, just to them, say, hey, let's talk on channel 6 at noon, and we'll just talk over lunch. Okay, we got to the end. That wasn't so painful now, was it? It was actually a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. It was fun to listen to that class and maybe add a few things that helped him to augment the class a little bit. People that have done some radio communications in the past were able to share little tidbits, and that helped to make the class a little bit more enjoyable and a lot more fun. So stay tuned. We're going to be teaching you a lot of the cool things about comms in future. Comms is king. That's what we use in the Army. That's a phrase we use. Got to have comms. And now, with this recent situation that we've had where we're all kind of hunkered down in our houses, we still had our phones, we still had our screens, we had all that stuff. But in the future, you may not. And but if you have planned out your communications and you have those things available, how to make the most out of your cell phone, which will show you all the best tips from that to make it more useful, even if the cell towers go down. But then also have a number of other backups to your communications so that you can still communicate with the people that you need to communicate with and check in and make sure that they're still safe and they're still good. So anyhow, stay tuned. Hopefully that was a lot of fun. And we'll catch you next time in the Comms is King segment. Till next time.